the mistreatment of the people.
Let me interrupt because my time is limited, unfortunately. You just said that this is that 10 years ago you wouldn't have agreed to a regime change. However, in 1998, you as a member of the New American Century sent a letter to President
Senator,
Clinton.
I said something different.
No, wait a sec. You were saying that we're seeing it in the light of September 11th. That's just not true. You've been advocating for regime change all through the late 90s. And in this letter,
Can I explain? There's a very clear
strategy
difference.
should aim, above all, this is 1998, the strategy should aim, above all, at the removal of Saddam Hussein's regime from power. You signed that letter.
Senator, there's a very big difference. I was very clear. I don't know if it's in that letter, but elsewhere, I never thought before September 11th that we should use tens of thousands of American troops to do the job.
Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me. And one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They've just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
In 1973, I was on a St. Louis radio station during the Arab oil embargo. And a non-Jewish caller called up and he said the following. He said, "You know, I don't understand. You Jews seem to be the tail that wags the dog. You want America to take great concern over the Jews of Russia and exacerbate tensions with the other superpower. You want us to help Israel and have hostile, therefore more hostile relations with those who have our oil. What gives with you Jews? Are you the tail that wags the dog?" It took the World Trade Center bombing to take Hamas seriously in America. It's too bad. Maybe had we taken it seriously sooner, a few families would have had their fathers and brothers and sons in New York. My friends, the enemies of Israel are not the Boy Scouts of the world. The enemies of Israel is Iran, which is destroying its Baha'is, Sudan, which actually crucifies blacks. New York Times article a couple of months ago, but didn't get to see that on CNN. Iraq, which is a living concentration camp for its own people. Syria, which destroyed 20,000 of its own citizens in just one fairly well-known operation a few years ago. Hamas, whose agenda is the destruction of anyone who opposes their theocracy. Those are the enemies of Israel. They are also the enemies of good people. It is not a position we Jews asked for, but when we make this known to non-Jews, they will understand why we are here.
Joining me now here in the BBC World studio is the former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, who's in London at the moment. Mr. Barak, welcome to BBC World. First, your reaction, having heard what's happened. At least 4 planes have been hijacked, and there may be more.
The world will not be the same from today on. I don't know who is responsible. I believe we will know in 12 hours. Bin Laden sits in Afghanistan. There is a source of
who else
terror.
can you identify, though? Because we're not saying he's responsible for this necessarily.
No, we don't say that he's responsible. Every simple step, crossing borders or going on a plane or on a ship, will become more complicated. It's a time to launch a operational, concrete war against terror, even if it takes certain pains from the routine activities of our normal society. This is the time to deploy a globally concerted effort led by the United States, the UK, Europe, and Russia against all sources of terror consistently along 6 or 10 years. Iran, Iraq, Libya, North Korea. This is the only way. Without this clarity of purpose, there will be no world order, no world order, no world order.
Working with our G8 partners, the United States has created the broader Middle East and North Africa Initiative to build partnerships with people in the region who are working for greater liberty. The flagship of this bold new policy is the Forum for the Future, an unprecedented international venue to amplify the voices of reform that are redefining the region. Together, we will tackle the urgent goals of the Forum: political openness, economic liberty, educational opportunity, and the empowerment of women. Today, nations all across the world are speaking a common language of reform, and they are helping citizens throughout the broader Middle East to transform the parameters of debate in their societies. The people of this region are expressing ideas and taking actions that would have been unthinkable only 1 year ago. Some in the Arab media have even asked why the only real democracies in the Middle East are found in the quote-unquote occupied lands of Iraq and the Palestinian territories. What an incredible thought. Today, citizens in the region are demanding that their governments respond to this simple, audacious question. And many states will have to answer their people's call for genuine reform. Jordan and Bahrain and Qatar and Morocco are all taking steps to introduce greater openness into their political systems. Egypt has amended its constitution with electoral reform, and even Saudi Arabia has held multiple elections. And just last week, remarkably, the Kuwaiti legislature granted its women citizens the right to vote.
There you have it. All the chaos we see today was deliberately planned by the Zionists. In 1982, Oded Yinon of Israel's foreign ministry drew up a plan for a greater Israel. The plan is to destabilize governments of surrounding regions by creating sectarian war to expand Israel's hegemony in the Middle East. It's been followed to the teeth. Iraq is divided, Syria is divided, ISIS is working to divide Lebanon, and if successful, Iran will be isolated.
The application of power is the most important thing in winning the war on terrorism. If I had to say, what are the 3 principles of winning the war on terror? It's like, what are the 3 principles of real estate, the 3 L's, location, location, location? The 3 principles of winning the war on terror are the 3 W's, winning, winning, and winning. The more victories you amass, the easier the next victory becomes. The first victory in Afghanistan makes the second victory in Iraq that much easier. The second victory in Iraq will make the third victory that much easier too, but it may change the nature of achieving that victory. It may be possible to have implosions taking place. I don't guarantee it, Mr. Turney, but I think it makes it more likely, and therefore I think the choice of Iraq is a good choice. It's the right choice.
Yeah. United States Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Peters drew up a revision to this plan in 2006. John Kerry is preaching these plans today and wants ISIS to remain in control of certain parts of Syria. Now with Iran, Netanyahu is saying the exact same jokes he said about Iraq.
Well, let me show you. Brought a diagram for you. Here's the diagram. If it looks like a duck, if it walks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, then what is it? What is it? That's right. It's a duck, but this duck is a nuclear duck.
A few days after the nuclear deal was announced, he released his latest book. Here it is. It's a 400-page screed detailing his plan to destroy the state of Israel.
Iran's regime is not merely a Jewish problem, any more than the Nazi regime was merely a Jewish problem.
Dude, it's a repeat.
This is a repeat of the Holocaust?
Yeah.
Yes. How?
We're being persecuted again for the trillionth time ever.
So we're fighting a second Nazi war against the Nazis.
Yeah.
We want to kill all Jewish people.
It's a double of the Holocaust.
The Israelis and the Saudis would love to see our money and our young men and women being killed to fight their enemies in Iran.
Are you?
When you look at the bottom line, who this benefits if it leads to military action against Iran, it only benefits the Israelis and Saudi Arabia. And there's a precedent for it. We've already fought 2 wars against Iraq in favor of Israeli interests and Saudi interests. So we're always being pushed to get our people killed for their interests. So I think it could happen another time. Why not?
It's those military men and women. It's you now. It's coming to you now. Are you a patriot or are you not? Are you going to let your nation descend even further into the chaos and corruption that has been so sick and so twisted that it's destroying American lives as well as the rest of the world, to the tune of 22 American servicemen a day who are committing suicide? Are you going to sacrifice more of your American sons and daughters for Israeli wars, for Zionist wars?